Of those who kept the protection is Abu Salama. Of course, Abu Salama is the husband of Salama. Abu Salama is going to die shortly, and the Prophet is going to marry Salama, right? So this is that Abu Salama. So Abu Salama returned back because Abu Salama and Salama migrated first, and then they migrated again, as we're going to talk about. There were two migrations to Abyssinia, as we're going to talk about. So Abu Salama comes back. Abu Salama is actually a cousin of the Prophet ﷺ. But he's a cousin from his mother's side, not the father's side. So Abu Salama is not Banu Hashim. Abu Salama is actually Banu Makhzum. Banu Makhzum is Abu Jahl. Right? Abu Salama is from the tribe of Abu Jahl. But his mother is the aunt of the Prophet ﷺ, i.e. Abdullah's sister. Right? You guys following? Abdullah's sister is Abu Salama's mother. So Abu Salama doesn't want to reach out to Abu Jahl. I mean, come on, Abu Jahl's not going to give me protection. So who can he reach out to? His uncle from his mother's side. Who is? Abu Talib. Abu Talib, right? Abu Talib is his mother's brother. So he sends a message to Abu Talib that, look, can you basically sponsor me? You know, can you get me into your tribe? Basically protection. So Abu Talib said, of course, yes. Now, what do you think Abu Jahl is going to do when he hears that somebody else has taken one of his tribe members? Who do you think you are? So a delegation comes from Banu Makhzum to the house of Abu Talib again. You're interfering in our politics. This is our guy, right? Who do you think you are to offer him protection? Because it's a matter of honor, it's a matter of snubbing their nose, basically, right? And so Abu Jahl and others, they get angry at Abu Talib. And Abu Talib said, well, if I'm going to give protection to one nephew, meaning the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, why can't I give protection to the other nephew? Meaning Abu Salama. I mean, if I'm going to protect one, why can't I protect the other? And so they were not going to budge, and they surrounded his house, and an argument broke out. And then Allah brought about a solution from a source we would never expect. Abu Lahab. Abu Lahab stood up and he said, have you not irritated this old man enough? I mean, Abu Talib is a senior figure. You know, he's an elderly person. Abu Lahab is now feeling compassion for his brother, not because he loves the Prophet ﷺ, but just as a brother. Because after all, they are brothers, you know. And so he stood up and he said, have you not irritated this old man enough? Let him be, utrukuhu. Come on, let him be. How much are you going to pester this guy? Let him be. For wallahi, if you're going to continue, then I'm going to have to force my side. I'm going to choose him. This is Abu Lahab speaking, right? And he's not speaking out of a love for Islam. He's speaking out of his love for his tribe and the protection of his chieftain, right? And as we said, that type of love is not going to help you in Islam. Even Abu Talib loved the Prophet ﷺ, but not a religious love. It was a love of uncle. It was a love of a fatherly figure. It was a love of a fellow Hashemite. But it was not a religious love that we have for our Messenger ﷺ. He didn't have that religious love. He had a paternal love. And that love is not going to necessarily save you from the punishment of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, even though it helped a little bit for Abu Talib's case. So Abu Lahab stood up and defended against Abu Jahl. Can you imagine? It's an amazing scene here, right? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chooses whomever He chooses to help this religion. Somebody like Abu Lahab, there have been more than one time where he's done small things that have brought some benefit to Islam, even though he didn't do it for the sake of Islam. And our Prophet ﷺ said in Medina many years later, he said, verily, Allah can help this religion from a kafir, from a pagan. Allah can help, Allah will help, sorry, is a better translation. Inna Allah la yu'ayyidu hadha ad-din. Allah sometimes helps this religion from a person who's not even a believer of it. And these types of incidents, they demonstrate the truth of what the Prophet ﷺ said. So the point being that the situation in Mecca remained status quo. It didn't change at all. And the Quraysh continued to persecute the Muslims. And so the initial batch that had immigrated from Abyssinia came together and decided, what do we do now? And the bulk of them said, let's go back. It was a mistake to come back. Now let us go back. But in the meantime, they had stayed in Mecca 2-3 weeks. And the news spread amongst all of the Muslims about how good life was in Abyssinia, at least in terms of physical harm. Yes, it was difficult culturally and language and climate, but not hostile. And you know, in the end of the day, you know, if you're living, as we said, the two best blessings that Allah gives, الَّذِي أَطْعَمَهُم مِّن جُوعٍ وَآمَنَهُم مِّن خَوْفٍ, right? These are the biggest blessings that Allah gives after Iman. And they had that in Abyssinia. They had food and they had safety. These are the best blessings. And so when they heard this, a large percentage of Muslims, we don't know how many Muslims were in Mecca at the time, there were no census, but it is probably correct to say that at least 30-40% of the Muslims of Mecca, if not 50%, decided to immigrate. Now that's a huge number, right? Yani half of your people are now leaving. Half of the Muslims are leaving. It's a huge number. And so, it is as if, and this is my opinion and Allah knows best, the wisdom why Allah allowed these early Muslims to come back only to return was so that the bulk of the Muslims, or a large group of Muslims, would then be convinced to travel to Abyssinia. Because as we all know, the number one way to be convinced is what? Word of mouth. It's the number one way to actually be convinced. My friend told me, right? That's the number one way. And there was no other way that so many Muslims would have emigrated to Abyssinia. No way. Unless Allah allowed the very Muslims who benefited to come back, tell the people status quo, and then people were convinced. And so, for the second immigration, more than 80 Muslims emigrated. That's more than quadruple the number that went the first time. More than 80 Muslims migrated, and this time they were headed by Ja'far ibn Abi Talib, the direct, obviously, cousin of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now, please note though, of that initial batch of 17, not all of them returned in the 80. 17 went and came back. Some of those decided to remain. The most famous person who remained, Uthman ibn Affan. Uthman ibn Affan decided to remain, and he then immigrated to Medina. He participated in Badr and Uhud and all of the rest of the battles. So Uthman ibn Affan did not go back the second time, right? Of course, Abu Salama, Salama went back, and Abu Salama then passed away over there. Other Sahaba that did not go back, it is said that Mus'ab ibn Umair, the famous Mus'ab ibn Umair, who was the first to immigrate to Medina, right, the first person who the Prophet sent to Medina, because his own parents had tortured him the worst torture, his own mother and father. So the Prophet first sent him to Abyssinia, then when he came back he decided that he wanted to stay with the Prophet. So he stayed with the Prophet, but then within 3 years, before the immigration that he himself did, the Prophet, he sent Mus'ab. As soon as the first batch of Muslims accepted Islam, the Prophet said to Mus'ab, go to Medina and you can live there. So Mus'ab also did not return to Abyssinia. Other Sahaba as well, some of them returned, some of them didn't. Now, when over 80 people, and Mecca at this time probably had only a few hundred people in it, right? So 80 people in Mecca represents more than 15%, 20% of the people of Mecca. It's a percentage of the city. Remember, Mecca is not a thriving metropolis. It is composed of, and I said this way back in the beginning, when we say tribe, don't think 1,000 people. Think more like 10. Look at the Banu Hashim. There were 10 brothers. Right? There were 10 brothers, the descendants of Abdul Muttalib. That's all they were, 10 brothers. So don't think of like massive, no, these are small sub-tribes, and there's only 6 or 7 sub-tribes of the Quraysh. So you do the math. Again, we don't have census records, but there were for sure, there were not more than 1,000 people in Mecca, for sure. And that's if there were 1,000, most likely there were even 600, 500. Out of that, 80 are migrating. I mean, that's like more than 10% of your population, right? And it's a big embarrassment that your own people are leaving. This is unprecedented in all of Arabia. You never have your own tribesmen migrate out of your tribe. It's a huge embarrassment. And this is the Quraysh, the one that is the strongest tribe, the most elite, the most protective, the custodians of the Haram. And now they have 10-15% of their own tribespeople emigrate. This is a shame. And they cannot bear this. And so, when they immigrated to Abyssinia, now the Quraysh decided, we cannot allow this immigration, we need to stop it. We need to stop it. So what did they do? They decided to send 2 people to Abyssinia and appeal directly to the Najashi. Najashi is the title of the person who rules Abyssinia. Like Caesar is the title of the ruler of Rome. Like Pharaoh is the title of the ruler of Egypt. This is not the name. Najashi is not his name. And in fact, his name was Ashuma. His name was Ashuma. The name of the Najashi with a Sad and a Ha. Ashuma. This is what we have narrated. And by the way, the grave of Najashi, of Ashuma, is still well known to this day. And some of my friends have visited it. I have not gone to that land, but some of my friends have visited. They said this is a well known, the grave of Najashi is well known in the land of Abyssinia. So they sent two delegates, Amr ibn al-As and another person. Scholars have differed who that second person was. Amr ibn al-As, for those of you who know who he is, you know who he is. For those who don't know who he was a very intelligent and shrewd politician. And when he accepted Islam, he retained that know-how of how to rule. And he became Muawiyah's main advisor, Amr ibn al-As. And of course, he's a companion, so we say nothing but good about him. But at this stage, he's not a Muslim, obviously. And he was a very cunning person at this stage. Later on, Iman came, and so alhamdulillah, he accepted Islam. And as a Sahabi, we say nothing but good of him. But he had that mind of a politician. And he had that blood in him. He had that prestige of being a ruler in him. This is Amr ibn al-As here. So Amr ibn al-As was sent by the Quraysh because they know who he is. And they sent one more person with him. So they traveled all the way to Abyssinia. Now, Salama, who was to become our mother, Salama has left us many reports about life in Abyssinia and about the details. And alhamdulillah, we thank Allah for this because she's the main reporter of the events of Abyssinia. And Salama narrated, and this is in Sahih Bukhari, Salama narrated, when we landed in Abyssinia, this is the second hijrah. When we landed in Abyssinia, we were treated very hospitably by the Negus. He granted us security in our religion. He allowed us to worship Allah without persecution or any hindrance. In fact, we did not even hear one ridicule against us by the people. You know that when you're a minority in a majority, usually there's racial slurs, usually there's, look at what's happening in America now, right? You know, these people are taking our jobs, they're this, they're that, you know what's happening, you know, it's a common thing. So Salama is saying that we didn't even hear one word spoken against us. But then the Quraysh heard of our status, that we have izzah. And so they plotted against us, and they decided to send two strong men. By strong, she meant people who would do their job, not physically strong. That two strong men. And they gave them precious gifts. They loaded them with gifts. What were the gifts of Mecca? Primarily leather skins. Mecca was known for a special type of camel leather, which was obviously, I mean, you're not going to get that type of leather in Abyssinia. And so Mecca was very well known for exporting. The main export of Mecca was that type of leather. The main export of Medina always was dates. So they sent all of these luxurious camel skins and many other gifts, and the two dignitaries, emissaries, arrived in Abyssinia. The first thing that they did was they went to all of the viziers, the ministers of Najashi, and they gave each of them expensive gifts and leather. Basically bribed them. They gave each of them expensive gifts and leather. And they said to them that we have in your midst a group of renegades and rebels. And we will speak to the Najashi tomorrow about their case, and we want you to hand them back to us and support us in this cause. So basically this is open bribery. Okay, this is open bribery. And so make sure that you help us out in this regard. When we give the Negus his gifts, remember our gifts to you, because they're going to bribe the Negus tomorrow. And subhanAllah, look at the hatred really of the Quraysh here, that they can't even bear to see the Muslims live in a foreign land. It affects them that they have so much freedom. So the next day they approached the Negus, and they said, some foolish youth from amongst our nation have emigrated to your country. They have left our religion and they have not embraced your religion. They've invented a new religion. They have left our religion and they have neither embraced your religion nor any of the other religions that we are aware of. And the leaders of our community have sent us to you in order that you hand these young foolish people back to us so that we can deal with them, because we are more knowledgeable of their faults than anybody else. And so they presented the negus with lots of fine gifts and incense, and they presented them with all of these leather goods. And subhanAllah, this is the reality of, in our times we call this lobbying basically, right? In our times we call this lobbying, that you go and you give politicians money. And when you give them money for their campaigns, for their funds, and this is perfectly legal in this land, as you know. It's perfectly legal. In fact, that's the way the system works, right? And subhanAllah, just as a comment here, it's not directly related to the seerah, it's a comment here. SubhanAllah, our religion is so perfect that our Prophet ﷺ, before all of this modern system came about, our Prophet ﷺ strictly forbade what we now call lobbying. Strictly, with the most harshest words. You're not allowed to give a public servant money. You're not allowed to. In our religion, I'm talking about in an Islamic state, we're not allowed to give the employees of the state any money at all. Their money comes from the treasury, from the state, because they're employees. They have no right to get any money from you, because that is going to sway them from their job, right? This is basically the essence of bribery. And subhanAllah, in this land, this is not called bribery, it's called lobbying. It's completely legit. Even though, and this is the irony here, if you pay them money directly to their pocket, this is bribery. But if you pay to their campaign, this is, or you pay something else, this is lobbying. And they just have their ways around it. You all know the famous hadith of the Prophet that he appointed somebody to go collect zakat, right? And the zakat collector came back, and he said, all of this is for you, and I was given a gift of something small. This is my gift, right? This is my lobbying I got. The Prophet ﷺ became so enraged that he stood up and he called the people to come to the masjid, and he gave a khutbah in the middle of the day, not on Friday. He gave a khutbah about this, and he said, what is wrong with some of you? He didn't mention the person name because he never did that. What is wrong with some of you that we appoint him to do a job and we pay his salary, and then he comes back and he says, this is for you and this gift is for me. And then the Prophet said something that is very, very blunt, but it shows how angry he was. Why didn't this man sit in his mother's house and see if a gift would then come to him? This is wallahi the essence of Islamic political science. Why didn't he sit in his house and then see if somebody would give him a gift, right? You have no right for the public's money. You're getting paid to do your job, do it. You're not getting paid to take the people's gifts and take a cut from them, right? But subhanAllah, the way that other systems work, it's a completely different system, and that's why money talks in this part of the world. And that's why if you have money, you will be able to get things passed, even at the highest levels of political power. And if you don't have money, even if the truth is on your side, and so the Quraysh know this tactic very well, and they're basically greasing the hands of Najashi and all of the people there. Now notice here, they are frightening the Najashi by religious differences, political differences, social differences, and perhaps even some scholars say economic bribery and differences. Religious differences, the Najashi and his followers are all Christian. So they come and they say, these guys are religious fanatics. They're neither our religion nor yours, they're a cult. Social differences, they say they have broken away from the elders. They're a bunch of youngsters. They're just dismissing them. Economic differences, well, perhaps not differences, but they're attempting to bribe. And some scholars try to say that, and Allah knows how true this is, that there was also insinuation that the economic treaties between Abyssinia and Mecca would be weakened. And Allah knows how true this is. Political as well, that these are a group of strangers. We don't know what's going to happen. We can control them, send them back to us. And every government in power is scared of unknowns. Every government is scared of unknowns. And so they're trying to frighten Najashi religiously, socially, politically, culturally. These guys are all weirdos. And to this day, that's the common tactic. That these people, we don't know what they are and who they are. So when they finished their petition, the vizier stood up. They've been bribed. And they said, O our ruler, verily what they have said makes complete sense. These are strangers in our land. We don't know anything about them. Return them back to their people. Let them deal with their affairs. SubhanAllah, money talks, right? They were bribed and they listened to the bribe. So the viziers all of them that had been bribed stood up and agreed with the two Qurayshis. Najashi said, no, by Allah, I cannot just hand them back after they have chosen my land. Now remember, when they entered Abyssinia, even though the books don't mention this, but it must have happened, they must have sent a petition to Najashi asking permission to live. Because there's no other way you can live in that land. And Najashi must have granted that petition. Even though the books of Seerah don't explicitly write it out, but it's understood. There's no other way. So Najashi is aware what's happening, that there's a group here from Mecca. So he said, these people have chosen me over all the other lands they could have chosen. And they ask for my protection. The least that I can do is to listen to their side of the story. SubhanAllah, look, he's a king. He doesn't need to listen to 80 people. Right? But what did the Prophet say? Malikun adil. Didn't he say that? He is a just king. And a just king will listen to both sides and decide what is right and wrong. Did not decide what is in his power or what is in his benefit. So he said, I will not return them back until I listen to them. He didn't say, I'm not going to return them back. He said, let me see what they have to say. And then we'll make up our minds. I can't just, and subhanAllah, look at this. I mean, this is way before we have modern law. Najashi has common sense. That you have to listen to both sides of the story. And so, Najashi says that we need to listen to their side. And this shows us how true the Prophet ﷺ was when he said he is a just king. And it also shows us that when Allah is on your side, Allah will plot and plan no matter what the others plot and plan. وَمَكَرُوا وَمَكَرَ اللَّهُ وَاللَّهُ خَيْرُ الْمَاكِرِينَ.